Raja ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadyasya yato nivayat itaratas charte suavigyaswarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vayaditaratas charte suavigyaswarat.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyantiyat Surayaha. Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mesha.
Tejo Varimrida Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mesha.
Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
O my Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is the eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitavutra.
Dharma prujita kaitavutra.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Vedyam vastavamatra vastu.
Vedyam vastavamatra vastu.
Shivadam tapo trayan mulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayan mulanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Kim va parir ishvaraha.
Kim va parir ishvaraha.
Sadyo hridi avarudite tra.
Sadyo rudya varidya titra.
Kriti bihi sususubhistakshanat.
Kriti bihi sususubhistakshanat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The higher truth is the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigamat kalpataror galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Muhur ahorasika bhuvibhavakaha.
Muhur ahorasika bhuvibhavakaha.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literature.
It emanated from the lips of Śrī Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Śrī Sukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for for all,
although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shambhatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hridyantaksto hi abhadrani,
Ridyantasto hiya bhadrani,
Vidunati Sruhitsatam.
Vidu noti surit satang.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling within everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts
heart,
as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotee who constantly engaged in hearing of him.
Nastapresu bhadresu
Nasta prayeshwa bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
nityang bhagavata sevaya
bhagavati uttamasloke
bhagavati uttamastloke
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
bhaktir bhavatir nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastumo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
kamalobhadayaschaye
cheta itaranavidam
cheta itaranavidam
stifam sattve prasidati.
stitam sattve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the mode of passion and ignorance,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and as material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasanna manaso
Evam prasanna manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yoga
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sanghasi Jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
and the man is steady in position of good,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the sons of God.
Vidyate hridaya granthis
Vidyate Hridaya Granthis
chidyante sarva samsaya
Chidyante Sarva Samshaya
siyante chasya karmani
Yante Sachakarmani
justa evatmanishvare.
Drusta Evatmanishvari.
Thus Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the hard note of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables us to come at once to the stage of Assumption Samangrama.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Understanding the supreme absolute truth. Personality.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees
can one understand the science of Krishna. And
and Krishna consciousness.
therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 35. Krishna gate bhagavati
Krishnagate Bhagavati
shastar utpata gaminam
Shastar Yutpata Gamina
tad setum adyaham
Tadvinna Setum Adyaham
shasmi pasyata me balam.
Shasme Pasyatame Balam.
Translation: After the departure of Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa, personality of Godhead, and supreme ruler of everyone, these upstarts have flourished, our protector being gone. Therefore, I myself shall take up this matter and punish them. Just witness my power. So these are the puffed up statements of Sringi. He's supposed to be as they say in English, the judge, the jury, and the executor, all in one. In other words, there's no separation of powers. He's got all the powers. He's God. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The inexperienced brāhmaṇa, puffed up by a little Brahma Tejas, became influenced by the spell of Kali Yuga. Maharaj Parikshit gave license to Kali to live in 4 places as mentioned herein before. But by his very expert government, the personality of Kali could hardly find places allotted to him. The personality of Kali Yuga therefore was seeking the opportunity to establish authority. And by the grace of the Lord, he found a hole in the puffed up, inexperienced son of a brāhmaṇa. The little brāhmana wanted to show his prowess in destruction, and he had the audacity to punish such a great king as Maharaj Parikshit. He wanted to take the place of Lord Kṛṣṇa after his departure. These are the principal signs of upstarts who want to take the place of Śrī Kṛṣṇa under the influence of the age of Kali. An upstart with a little power wants to become an incarnation of the Lord. There are many false incarnations after the departure of Lord Kṛṣṇa from the face of the globe, and they are misleading the innocent public by accepting the spiritual obedience of the general mass of people to maintain false prestige. In other words, the personality of Kali got the opportunity to reign through the son of a brāhmana, Śṛṅgi. Śrīla Prabhupada Patita Pavane Ki Jai. Well, whenever a person gets, if you really want to know who a person is, give them some power. Then you really know who they are. As soon as they get some power and prestige, they, as they say in English, go off the rails. A train off the rails is worth nothing. It's just a wreck. In this way, when someone is puffed up, you give them some power, and they will eat their own nose or smite their own face, as they say. So, puffed up by a little Brahma Tejas, became influenced by the spell of Kali Yuga. And what does Kali Yuga do? What does this personality of Kali do? He's looking for people who are puffed up with false prestige, false ego, just like the frog in the well. The frog in the well thought that the whole universe is his well. And there was another frog who ventured outside of his little universe, the well, not the frog in the well, but another frog, and he saw the Pacific Ocean. So he came back and told the puffed up frog in the well, "Wow, you can't believe what I saw. I saw a place much bigger than your well." And the frog said, "That can't be." He said, no, it's much bigger. He said, "Wait a minute, let's see." So he puffed himself up and took a big breath. He said, "Is it this big?" He said, no, it's a lot bigger. Then he puffed up some more. He said, "Is it this big?" He said, no, it's bigger. Then he puffed himself up some more, and he busted open and died. So, you see, there's false prestige based on a very limited time-space capsule. What is a time-space capsule? That is, people live in short periods of time in different spaces. Like, say, how big is your bedroom? Because you spend at least 6, 8, sometimes 14, 16 hours a day in the bedroom, right? But it can't be more than 200 square feet, 300 square feet, sometimes 400 square feet, 500 square feet, that's it, right? How about the kitchen? You spend a lot of time in the kitchen. How big is the kitchen? 150 square feet, 200 square feet, 300 square feet. And you spend time in the car. How big is the car? 1 cubic yard, hardly. Right? Depends if you have a little Honda or Toyota, what do you call it, electric or hybrid, or if you have a big Cadillac, doesn't matter, or a big Lincoln. Still, it's a small space, 1 to 2 square cubic yards. So most of our time, or let's say you go to the office and you have an office, well, those office spaces are usually small, especially if you're a banker. It used to be that everybody had an office in IT, but now they want to have everyone in a big room so everyone sees what everybody else is doing. But anyway, these are small spaces, so that's a time space capsule that we're living in. It's like if you go up into the space station, you're in a very restricted time-space capsule. Right? And we live like the frog in the well. And when we hear Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita talking about the universal form, talking about all the different planetary systems, Bhur, Bhuva, Swar, it's hard to imagine these things. And then you hear about the duration of Brahma's lifetime. My God, you're talking about 311 trillion years. I mean, how can you even imagine such a thing? Well, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita is to help us expand our consciousness. But if we're like the frog in the well, we want to bring Kṛṣṇa down to our level. We want him to fit into our time-space capsule. We don't want to fit into his time-space capsule because it's impossible for us. So we want to bring him down to our level. So this is what this puffed-up little brāhmaṇa was trying to do, is bring Kṛṣṇa down to his level so he can become Kṛṣṇa. And that is, of course, impossible. But it is possible in the confused mind of a puffed-up nonsense person. Then again, it says, the personality of Kali Yuga, therefore, was seeking the opportunity to establish authority. Well, let's talk about this, how to establish authority. One time, I've told you this story before, one time this man came to our temple when it was a little house, and he listened to the lecture. And after the lecture, I went into the kitchen to serve everybody prasadam. And he walked in and he said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "What? I don't think we've introduced each other, we've been introduced to each other." I said, "Who are you?" He said, and he took his wallet out, took a card out, and handed me the card. And I looked at the card and it said, International, what was that? The International Rosicrucian Society endorses Mr. So-and-so as a bona fide person on the level of God. So I looked at the card. I said, "So you're God?" He said, "Yes." I said, "How did you become God?" He said, "Well, I did a little bit of meditation and smoked some marijuana, not a lot. And I was reading the Bible, and I became God." I said, "Now I know that you are an imposter, a rascal, a fool, and lower than the microbe in the intestine of an insect." He said, "What?" I said, "You're lower than that." He said, you don't understand. Did you read my card?" I said, "Yeah, I read your card. Of course I read your card." I said, you don't become God by some meditation, smoke a little marijuana, and read the Bible. That's not the way God doesn't become God. God is God. He doesn't have to become God. The fact that you said you became God means you're not qualified to be even in the intestine of the microbe, in the intestine of the insect. You're not even qualified to be that. So he got really upset, He said, you guys are phonies, I knew it. You don't know what you're talking about. And he walked out. So, this establishing authority, how did Prabhupada establish his authority? Let's talk about that. When he first came to the United States, nobody understood who he was. They used to call him Swamiji. Sometimes they pat him on the back. How you doing, Swamiji? Right? So how did he establish his authority? What's your opinion? Anybody have an opinion? Did he do it by dictate? No. By example. What was the example?
Humble servant of God.
Yeah, by his humility. He was cooking for the devotees. He was serving the devotees. He was speaking Bhagavad Gita as it is to the devotees. And he was extremely kind. And he was living very austerely. He had no furniture in his little apartment. It was a very small apartment. No furniture at all. And just his 3 volumes of the first canto that he had printed, and eventually a typewriter which was stolen, a manuscript of Bhagavad Gita that he was going to print that was stolen, the whole manuscript. He had to rewrite the whole thing. And he got a phone, and then after a couple of days he said, I regret having this phone. And the boy said, why, Swamiji? He said, people are calling me up 12 o'clock at night. They're saying, how are you, Swamiji? He said, this is nonsense. I don't want a phone if it's going to be like this. So, and it took him a long time to get the phone. It used to be difficult to get a phone in the United States. Did you know that? Especially in places like New York City, where there's so many people asking for phones. You'd have to wait some time. Well, anyway, it was a wait at one time. Nowadays, you can get it right away. So, Prabhupada established his authority by being a pure and humble devotee. And eventually, one day, the devotee said, hey, Swamiji, are there any rules in Krishna consciousness? Because, he wasn't talking about, you have to do this, you have to do that. And Prabhupada said, oh, yes, there are a few rules. And he wrote them down. And when the devotees read it, they regretted asking the question. And you can see it. The manuscript is there. There's one sheet of paper, and he wrote down the rules. And the rules were like, anyone who lives in a temple must attend morning and evening program. That's rule number 1 or 2. They have to chant 16 rounds and so forth. So, why don't you look it up, Dhananjaya? Prabhupada wrote down the rules to follow by all devotees living in the temple. So he established his authority like that, through kindness and humility and genuine affection. So basically, he establishes authority by love. And what is the 6 symptoms of loving exchanges between devotees? Dadati pratikinati guyam ya aikyati prichati unkte bojayate chaiva sadvida pritilakshanam. So, it's by exchanging 6 things. Giving and receiving prasadam, giving gifts and receiving gifts, and exchanging endearing thoughts about Krishna with each other. So he engaged in these 6 types of loving exchanges with the devotees. In fact, that is the purpose of a temple. A temple is a place where these 6 types of loving exchanges take place on a regular basis. It's the way to show love and respect for other people. Okay, so that is about how to establish authority. Of course, Kali, the personality of Kali, established authority by scrambling, by taking advantage of the scrambled up brain of Śṛṅgi, the inexperienced Brahmin boy who was puffed up by false prestige and false concepts and false ego. So, anyone who has a false ego becomes a target for Kali, because they know, just like there's this history, once there was a king, and he had these very expensive horses, and he was a very prominent king, a lot of riches, and he also kept a troop of monkeys in his royal gardens. So the horses had their stable, and the monkeys were monkeying around on the trees in the garden and eating fruits and things like that. So one day, the elder monkey, the godfather or grandfather of all the other monkeys, he called a meeting. He called it Istagosi. And he said, my dear sons and daughters, he said, I have a premonition. You know how much the king loves his horses. They're very expensive. But recently he bought this ram. A ram is a big, powerful goat. Right? He said, that ram is a nonsense. And they all started laughing. And he said, don't laugh, he said. This is serious. He said, that ram is a nonsense. And I can foresee that one day he'll probably do something like set fire to the stables where the horses are. And many of the horses will get burned. And because they're extremely expensive, the king will freak out and he'll ask his advisors what to do. And the advisors will say, there's only one solution to heal those terrible wounds of the horses. And the king will say, what's that? He said, monkey fat. He said, what? Monkey fat. He said, okay, go kill the monkeys right away. So all the monkeys started laughing. They started laughing, hysterically. They said, you old man, you don't know what you're talking about. Go back to your little hut or whatever and keep your theories to yourself. He said, wait a minute. He said, listen, you're all young. You don't have experience. I'm telling you, this is going to happen. They said, well, what should we do? I said, we should immediately leave and go back to the jungle. I said, no way, you crazy? We're getting this good food every day, and we get nice fruits, and we can reproduce as much as we want, and we're safe. Why should we go back to the jungle? He said, don't you understand? You could all be killed. He said, oh, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. That's just some speculation. So the old monkey was really disappointed. But he left because he said, I know this is going to happen. He left and went away by himself. And one day, the ram somehow or other got loose from where he was tied up, and he started walking around. He was really, he was a powerful animal. And he walked into the barn where there was a kerosene lamp and knocked it over. And it started a fire, and many of the horses, and the barn burned down, and many of the horses were seriously injured. And the king called his ministers and doctors and said, what should we do? The horses are seriously damaged and hurt. And one doctor said, oh, great king, he said, there's only one solution to this, monkey fat. So the king said, go kill all those dumb monkeys and give me the fat. Right? So they killed all the monkeys, and they used the fat to heal the wounds of the horses. Now, the old monkey was alone in the jungle, and of course, there are fruits and things, but there are, wild animals also, and there's always an issue about water. So one day he was really thirsty. It was a hot day, and he couldn't find any fruits that day that are juicy. And he was walking around, and he came upon a big lake. And he said, "Oh, that lake looks really pristine and nice. Let me go drink some of the water." So he started walking toward the lake, but he was looking down, and all of a sudden he stopped, and he looked around like this, and he ran back and hid behind a rock. Now, why did he do that? Because he saw that there were many tracks of animals going into the lake and no tracks of animals coming out of the lake. So he became suspicious. He was a wise old monkey. So after about a half an hour, he was thirsty, but he didn't want to walk into the lake. After about a half an hour, this gigantic demon comes out of the lake. And he starts talking to the monkey. He said, "Oh, wise monkey, why did you not come into the lake?" He said, "Sir, please don't hurt me. Please, please, please. No, you're hiding behind that rock. But I want to know why you didn't want to come into the lake like all the other animals and dummies." He said, "Well, I saw a bunch of tracks going into the lake, but no tracks coming out." He said, "You're a very wise monkey." He said, "I live off of eating foolish animals. But I have respect for you because you have some intelligence. Ask any benediction of me and I'll give it to you." The monkey thought for a minute. He said, "Well, let me tell you a story." He told him a story about the king, the horses, the ram. And the demon started laughing. He said, "Is that all your problem?" He said, "Well, I want to get some revenge." He says, "That's all your problem?" He said, "What are you going to do? I don't know. The king has an army, and he has so many soldiers. I don't know." He said, "Don't worry," he said. "I'll be right back." So he goes back into the water and comes back, and he's holding this very expensive necklace full of jewels. And the monkey's looking at it, and he said, "Well, yes, sir, what's your solution?" He says, "Don't you see this necklace?" He said, "Yeah, I see the necklace." He said, "I'm going to give it to you." He said, "Well, how will that help me?" He says, "You put it on and go back to the palace and start running around with the necklace on." He said, "Well, they'll catch me." He said, "Yeah, they'll catch you. Of course they're going to catch you. And they'll take the necklace away from you. And just say, 'There's more of this where I came from.' And when they hear that, they'll tell the king, and the king will ask you to tell him where you got the necklace. And you tell him, 'There are many more like this.' And the king will say, 'Well, where is it?' He said, 'I'll take you. You're the king. You deserve to have all the wealth in the world.'" So he did it, and exactly that happened. They caught him and took him, and he said, "There are many more necklaces," and they told the king, and the king said, "Bring that stupid monkey here." And they brought him, and he said, "Where did you get this from?" He said, "Oh, there's this lake in the forest, and there's hundreds and hundreds of necklaces like this. I got one of the smaller ones." He said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." "You show me where that is." He said, "Sure, you're the king. You deserve everything." So the king had the monkey sit next to him on his golden chariot, and he summoned all the soldiers, and all the family members wanted to go. The queen and the sisters and the assistants and the brothers and the children, they all got dressed in their best finery. And they all went into the forest, and finally they came to the lake, and they were looking at the lake, and the king said, "Okay," he also got off the chariot. So let me go in there and see. So wait a minute, king, you're the king. You don't get off your chariot and walk into the water. Why don't you and I go up on that little hill, and then when you give the signal, anybody wants to go in the water, let him go in the water and pick all those thousands and thousands of necklaces out of that water, and you'll be the richest king in the world. He says, you're right. Yeah, I don't have to walk in there. Yeah, he said, you're not that dumb at all. He said, you're actually a good advisor. He said, yeah, okay, let's go up the hill and we'll watch and I'll give the signal. So they're up there, and finally the king says, when I raise my arms and put them down, you guys, whoever wants to go in there and get as many necklaces as possible, they all belong to me, of course, but I'll give you some reward. So all the soldiers got ready, but the wives and the kids and the relatives, they all said, wait a minute, we're the king's relatives. We should go first. They said, okay. So they got down, and they went in first, and then the soldiers went in, and the king was there watching like this, and all of a sudden, people started disappearing. And after about 10 minutes, there was no one left. And the king was bewildered, and he looked at the monkey, and the monkey wasn't there. The monkey went way up into a tall tree, and the king said, what happened here? And the monkey said, you killed my people, and now all your people are dead. And then the monkey went from tree to tree and ran away. So this is a story in the Panchatantra. See, there are many stories in the Panchatantra. What you see in the Amar Chitrakar are the more benign stories. There are a lot of more heavy stories in the Panchatantra that you usually don't hear about or see. And I can't even tell some of them. It would be inappropriate in the temple to even talk about them. So they're not all these, animal stories that are really, have a nice moral to them. There's some stories with very heavy stories with morals. And anyway, what was the king's problem? He was greedy. And he wanted to be the most powerful king. Just like there's a saying, Humpty Dumpty on the wall, who's the most powerful of them all? Right? So one time, one of the so-called acharyas said, Guru on the wall, who's the greatest of them all? Of course, he fell down. He was one of the first that fell down. And there were a lot others that fell down also. So this desire to be number one, the desire to be the most popular, having the most, let's say, disciples, or the most money, or the most this or that. One time, a devotee said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen devotee in the world. And Prabhupada said, you're not the most anything. Because if you say, I'm the most fallen devotee, that means you're the best devotee, right? And Prabhupada said, you're not the most anything. And that's the point. We should not aspire to be anything more than the sincere disciple of pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada. And there's a very interesting verse like this in the Bhagavad Gita, which says, 3rd chapter, Karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyartan vimudatma mityacharan sa uchyate. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. And the purport, Prabhupada says, there are many pretenders who refuse to work in Krishna consciousness but make a show of meditation while actually dwelling within the mind upon sense enjoyment. Such pretenders may also speak on dry philosophy in order to bluff sophisticated followers. But according to this verse, these are the greatest cheaters. For sense enjoyment, one can act in any capacity of the social order, but if one follows the rules and regulations of his particular status, he can make a gradual progress in purifying his existence. But he who makes a show of being a yogi while actually searching for the objects of sense gratification must be called the greatest cheater, even though he sometimes speaks of philosophy. His knowledge has no value, because the effects of such a sinful man's knowledge are taken away by the illusory energy of the Lord. Such a pretender's mind is always impure, and therefore his show of yogic meditation has no value whatsoever. So, there was once a cat who was getting old, and he wasn't able to catch any mice. So he thought, well, how can I get some mice? How can I get them to come to me? I can't go to them. They get away too easily now. I'm getting old. I got a little bit of arthritis and so forth. So he said, oh, I got an idea. I'll become a yogi. So he assumed the position of a yogi in meditation. And of course, mice are curious, and they knew the cat's dangerous. They would never go near the cat. But then one mouse sort of ventured out of curiosity, because the cat was sitting in a yogic position, and saying, oh. The mouse was saying, wow, that's a cat. But he's saying Om. He looks like a yogi. So he went a little bit closer, and nothing happened. So he went right up to the cat, and he said, oh, saintly yogi, are you a cat or are you a yogi? And he said, my dear brother, I was a cat, but now I'm a yogi. He said, you don't want to eat me? He said, no way, Jose. I'm a vegetarian. The mouse said, that's amazing. I've never heard of anything like this. So he ran back and told all the mice that there's a cat who's a vegetarian and he's a yogi and he's chanting Om. So a whole bunch of mice came, and they were like, they couldn't believe what they were saying. And they said, could you chant Om for us? He said, yes. Om. And then the mouse said, oh, we can feel the vibration of your peace. He said, yes, I am a yogi. So the mice, after a little while, one by one, they left because they get hungry or they get bored watching him say Om. And there'd be maybe one or two mice left. And those are the mice that he would catch and eat, because they were right next to him. So as time went on, the king of the mice noticed that the population was decreasing. So he became very curious, because they were telling him about this cat that's a yogi, So he decided to go see himself. But he kept some distance from the cat, because after all, it's a cat, right? And he was hiding behind some bushes and just watching. So all the mice went there, the ones that were remaining. And one by one, they left, and there was only one mouse left. And the mouse said it was there, and then the cat all of a sudden jumped on the mouse and ate him. And now the king understood. But there was nothing he could do. So he went back and informed all the other mice that this yogi was not a yogi. He was an imposter, a pretender, a nonsense. And he had eaten so many other mice, and they should not go there anymore. So this is the case where if a person has any tendency to want to be a enjoyer and a dominator, Kali will target that person. And Kali will try and enter into the mind and the psyche of that person and offer different strategies how that person can become more prominent, more powerful, more prestigious, and so forth, and really get them all puffed up so they act like a fool. And eventually they will fall down. So this is problem with being inexperienced and not carefully being trained by bona fide Siksha and Diksha gurus, and then developing this puffed up attitude because of a little bit of position or power or whatever. And then all of a sudden, one wants to establish their authority either by dictate or force, just like Hitler. Hitler was a nobody. He was an absolute nobody, right? But somehow or other, he was a painter. One time I met a guy, and I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "I'm a painter." I said, "Oh, really? You're like an artist and you paint on canvas?" He said, No, I paint houses." So that was Hitler. Hitler was a house painter. He's a nonsense, right? But somehow or other, he became this gigantic dictator and caused the death of hundreds and millions of people. Just caused complete havoc. So we have to be very careful not to become like Hitler, not to be puffed up, not to be not to seek prestige, and not to be inexperienced like Śṛṅgi. We should gather experience, and there's different ways of gathering experience. One is by hearing. That's the best. Another is by hearing, but you want to see also. That's okay, but if you learn your lesson, it's okay. But if you don't, then you want to hear, you want to see, but you want to do it. Well, if you do it, then you can get totally contaminated and not get out. So very few people who actually say, "No, I want to experience it." Well, some of them may come back to the right conclusion, but most of them will be lost. So the best is to hear from bona fide authorities and understand and get what's called to acquire vicarious experience. Vicarious is a big word in English. It's one of those PhD words, but it means you gain your experience by hearing from others. You don't have to see it, you don't have to do it. You gain the experience by hearing from bona fide sources. Okay, so we'll stop right there. And are there any questions? I was actually going to talk about something else today, but I went into all this. We'll keep that for tomorrow. Are there any questions or comments?
So here in the example, what Śṛṅgi is done is actually, as per, Acharyas, they say that it's because he puffed up. But if someone...
Inexperienced and puffed up.
Yeah, experienced puffed up. But if someone look at it, maybe it's sheer love towards his father, that someone... Because in general, person, if somebody insulted somebody, we don't care, right? But if somebody insults your own father, wife, brothers, then you automatically, it's natural reaction, right? It comes up. So, how do we differentiate that? Like, is a natural intent, or it's just puffed up, or?
Well, what was Śṛṅgi's mistake? His mistake was he didn't get the advice of his father what to do. In other words, he assumed that he had the authority to act on his own without his father's advice. First of all, if the father was insulted, he would have said something. He didn't say anything, and he didn't feel insulted. You see, so Śṛṅgi, because of his inexperience, just like, what do we teach the kids? We teach the kids, one, always do things favorable for Kṛṣṇa. Never do anything unfavorable for Kṛṣṇa. And always seek the protection of Kṛṣṇa by being dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and that mercy comes through Siksha and Diksha gurus. And when in doubt, go to Siksha and Diksha guru and ask advice. This is what we teach our kids. Is that right, Samut? You learned that? Yeah. So, Śṛṅgi didn't ask his father whether he was insulted or not insulted. He just assumed that it was his ability to, what do you call here, establish authority. There's an opportunity to establish authority for him. Well, he already thought he had the authority because he was the son of a brāhmaṇa. And he knew, he had some brahmatejas. He knew how to throw the brahmastra weapon. By the way, did he know how to take it back? We don't know for sure. And that was the same problem with Asvatthama. He learned from his father how to throw the brahmastra, but he didn't know how to stop it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think Śṛṅgi threw a brahmastra, but he made this curse, right? So, therefore, we shouldn't do anything. Nothing. No, I mean, no important decision in our life without getting the help of Siksha and Diksha gurus, advice. That's if you're initiated. If you say, "Well, I'm not initiated," okay, then do whatever you want to do, right? But or you can go to some speculator and get advice. But just like people that go to stock market gurus, they call them gurus, right? And they say, "I got $500,000. How should I invest it?" So he said, "Well, there's this new startup in Mongolia. They're going to start issuing credit cards to the Mongolians." He said, "Really? I thought they live in huts and they ride on camels and no. They're getting evolved now." So he said, "Okay, yeah, you can get 500% profit in 1 year if you do this." He said, "Okay, well, I can't beat that." So he invests the money. He gives it to this guy, and he invests the money. Actually, he didn't invest the money. He put it in his own bank account. He bought himself a new Tesla and so forth. And then after 1 year, the company we invested the money in, it went under, meaning there's no money left, right? So, you go to these stock gurus, but are they actually a guru? See, they're not really a guru. By the way, it's the same thing. You give your kid to the school, and the school puts your kid in a class, let's say a smaller class, the younger kids, they have a kindergarten teacher. Now, they show you the academic credentials of that teacher. She graduated from the University of Washington, and she got a master's degree from some university in Alabama. And then she got her teacher's certification in 2017, and she's been a teacher for 3 years in kindergarten. Well, you have all her academic credentials, but do you have her moral credentials? No. She could be a dope dealer. She could be a heroin addict. You don't know. She could be divorced 10 times. You don't know who she is. You just saw her academic qualifications. So here's something that Prabhupada says. You can think about it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. 1840. Can find it if I can't find it. Anyway, he says that basically he says before you entrust your child to a teacher, you should not only look at the academic credentials, but you should also look at their moral credentials. That makes sense, doesn't it? In modern, here it is, 1st Canto, 9th chapter, verse 26. In modern education, teachers' academic qualification are considered without evaluation of the teacher's moral life. There you are, right there. 1.9.26. 1.9.26, Srimad Bhagavatam. So he says, and it's a wonderful purport. In fact, this was one of the subjects I was going to talk about today. Let's see where he says that. Yeah, he says, in modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. Haribo, rest my case. 1.9.26. Okay, we'll stop now. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.